The medical station on Nexus 7 smelled like recycled air and disinfectant, a combination that Daniel Cole had grown to hate over the past 8 years of hauling cargo across the galaxy. Sat in the crowded waiting room with his hands folded in his lap, watching the various alien species around him shuffle toward the front desk. When their names were called, the station was neutral ground, a place where anyone could come for medical supplies if they had the credits to pay. Daniel had the credits, barely enough for his monthly dose of Syntholex. The only medication that kept him alive syndrome was not a kind disease. It attacked the nervous system slowly, shutting down one function at a time until the body simply forgot how to breathe. Without his monthly injection, Daniel had maybe 3 to 4 weeks before things got bad, and another week after that before the end came. He tried not to think about it too much. The line moved forward, and he shifted in his seat, glancing around the room out of habit. That was when he noticed her. She sat in the far corner, away from everyone else, her thin body pressed against the wall as if she wanted to disappear into it. She was Tarani, one of the avian species that Daniel had encountered a few times during his travels. The Tarani were known for their beautiful feathers and their artistic talents, but they held little power in galactic society. Most of them worked low-paying jobs or struggled to make ends meet on their homeworld. This one looked young, probably just barely an adult by Tarani standards. Her feathers, which should have been bright blue and silver, were dull and falling out in patches. She trembled visibly, her large eyes staring at nothing. Daniel recognized the signs of serious illness when he saw them. He had seen enough sickness in his life to know when someone was running out of Timor. Mechanical voice echoed through the room, calling out a name that sounded like wind chimes breaking. The young Tarani stood up slowly, her legs shaking beneath her, and made her way to the front desk. Daniel watched her go, something heavy settling in his chest. The clerk at the desk was a Voldari, a species known for their efficiency and their complete lack of emotional warmth. Looked at the Tarani girl with the same expression he gave everyone else, which was no expression at all. Name and identification, he said in a flat tone. Myra Velshin, the girl replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She handed over a small card, and the clerk scanned it without looking at her. You are here for Syntholex, correct? Yes, Myra said, and Daniel noticed how her hands gripped the edge of the counter. I have crystalline fever, and I need the medication today. The clerk typed something into his console, and then he paused. His eyes moved to the screen, then back to Myra, and something that might have been annoyance flickered across his face. Your credits are insufficient, he said. The price of Syntholex has increased due to supply shortages. You are short by 400 galactic credits. Myra's feathers flattened against her body, a sign of distress that even Daniel could recognize. There must be some mistake, she said, her voice cracking. I saved for months to come. Here, I sold everything I had. Please, check again. The clerk did not check again. He simply stared at her with those cold Veldari eyes and repeated himself. Your credits are insufficient. Station policy does not allow for payment plans or credit extensions. You will need to return when you have the full amount. But I traveled 3 systems to get here, Myra said. And now Daniel could hear the desperation breaking through. I do not have time to go back and earn more. Without this medicine, I will die. Please, is there nothing you can do? The clerk blinked once slowly, as if her words were an inconvenience he had to endure. I am sorry for your situation, he said, though his tone suggested he was not sorry at all. But policy is policy. Next in line. Please. Myra stood frozen at the counter for a long moment, her whole body trembling. Now Daniel watched her struggle to find words, to find some argument that might change the outcome. But there was nothing she could say. The Veldari had already moved on, already calling the next patient forward. Large Krethian merchant pushed past Myra without a second glance. and she stumbled to the side, barely catching herself on a nearby chair. She did not cry. Daniel had heard that tyranny considered public displays of grief to be shameful, a sign of weakness that brought dishonor to their families instead. She simply walked back to her corner and sat down, her dull feathers falling around her like dead leaves. She stared at the floor, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, waiting for nothing. Daniel felt his prescription card in his pocket, a small piece of plastic that represented his own survival. He had exactly enough credits for his dose. Nothing more. If he used those credits, he would live another month. If he did not, he would start dying in about 3 weeks. The math was simple, but as he sat there watching Mira Velshin slowly accept her death sentence, Daniel found that the math did not matter as much as he thought it would. He thought about his sister back on Earth, how she had died 15 years ago from a disease that should have been treatable. The doctors had the medicine, but his family did not have the money. He remembered sitting in a waiting room just like this one, watching his mother beg for help that never came. He had sworn after that day that he would never let money decide who lived and who died. He had sworn that he would be different from all those people who looked away. The line moved forward again, and the mechanical voice called another name. Daniel stood up, but he did not walk toward the front desk. Instead, he walked toward the corner where Myra sat alone with her grief and her fading feathers. He did not know what he was going to say. He only knew that he could not look away. Not this time, not ever again. Mira did not look up when Daniel approached her. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor, her thin shoulders hunched forward as if she was trying to make herself as small as possible. Daniel stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say, before finally lowering himself into the empty seat beside her. "Hey," he said softly, "are you okay?" It was a stupid question, and he knew it the moment the words left his mouth. Of course she was not okay. She was dying, and she had just been told that her death was simply a matter of policy. Myra glanced at him briefly, her large amber eyes filled with confusion. Humans were not common in this part of the galaxy, and she had probably never spoken to one before. "I am fine," she said, her voice flat and empty. "Thank you for your concern." Daniel shook his head. "No, you are not fine," he said. "I heard what happened at the desk. Crystalline fever, right? How long do you have without the treatment?" Mira was silent for a long moment, and Daniel thought she might not answer, but then she spoke, her words coming out slowly, as if each one cost her something. 2 weeks. Maybe less," she said. "The fever is already in my bones. I can feel it spreading every day. Soon my feathers will all fall out, and then my organs will start to crystallize. It is not a peaceful way to die." Daniel felt his stomach twist. He had heard of crystalline fever before, a disease that only affected certain avian species. The crystals that formed inside the body were actually quite beautiful, or so he had been told, but the process of forming them was agonizing, like glass growing inside your veins. "Why did you come all the way out here?" he asked. "There must be medical stations closer to your homeworld." Myra let out a small sound that might have been a laugh in better times. "There are," she said, "but none of them had Synthilex in stock. The shortage has affected everyone, and the few stations that have the medicine charge prices that most tyranny cannot afford. I heard that Nexus 7 still had supplies, so I sold everything I owned and traveled here. My paintings, my furniture, even my mother's necklace that she gave me when I came of age. It was supposed to be enough." Her voice broke on the last word, and she turned her face away. Daniel could see her fighting to maintain her composure, to hold back the grief that threatened to spill over. "What about your family?" he asked. "Can they help?" Mira shook her head. "My father is too old to work," she said. "My mother takes care of him. I have a younger brother who is still in school. I am the one who supports them. If I die, I do not know what will happen to them." She paused, her hands tightening in her lap. "I am not afraid to die," she said quietly, "but I am afraid of what my death will do to the people I love." Daniel sat back in his chair. His mind racing, he thought about his own situation, about the prescription card in his pocket, and the 3 weeks of life it represented. He thought about the dangerous cargo routes that paid well but often killed the pilots who flew them. He thought about the possibility of earning enough credits in time to save himself, if he was lucky, if everything went right. And then he thought about Myra, who had no options left at all. She had done everything she could. She had sold her belongings, traveled across 3 systems, and begged for mercy from a clerk who had none to give. She had 2 weeks to live, and no way to change that. Daniel had 3 weeks and a chance. However, small, the weight of the decision settled on his shoulders like a physical thing. He could feel his heart beating faster, his palms growing damp with sweat. This was not a choice that made sense by any rational measure. He would be trading a certainty for an uncertainty, giving up his guaranteed survival for the hope that he might find another way. When he looked at Myra, at her dull feathers and her trembling hands, he knew that there was no real choice at all. He had known since the moment he watched her walk away from that counter. "What is your name?" he asked. "Myra," she said. "Myra Velshin." "I am Daniel," he said. "Daniel Cole." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his prescription card. For a moment, he just looked at it, this small piece of plastic that had controlled his life for so many years. Then he stood up and walked toward the front desk. Myra watched him go, confusion flickering across her face. The Veldari clerk looked up as Daniel approached, his expression as blank as before. "Name and identification," he said. Daniel handed over his card. "I want to transfer my credits to another patient," he said. "Her name is Myra Velshin. She needs Synthelex for crystalline fever." The clerk paused, his fingers hovering over the console. "You understand that this will leave your account with insufficient funds for your own prescription?" He said. "Yes." Daniel said, "I understand. Do it." The clerk stared at him for a long moment, something almost like curiosity in his cold eyes. Then he shrugged and typed the commands into his system. "Transfer complete," he said. "The patient Myra Velshin may now collect her medication." Daniel nodded and stepped away from the counter behind him. He heard the mechanical voice call out Myra's name again. He did not turn around. He just walked toward the exit, his hands empty, his future uncertain, and his conscience clear for the first time in 15 years. Myra heard her name called and felt confusion wash over her like cold water. She had just been turned away. She had just been told that there was nothing anyone could do, but the mechanical voice was clear, repeating her name with the same emotionless tone as before. She stood up slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her, and looked toward the front desk. The human was gone, the seat beside her was empty, and she could see his back disappearing through the exit doors on the far side of the room. A terrible suspicion began to form in her mind. She walked to the counter, her heart pounding in her chest, and faced the Veldari clerk once more. "I do not understand," she said. "I was told my credits were insufficient." The clerk looked at his screen and then back at her. "Your account has been updated," he said. "A transfer was made on your behalf. You now have enough credits. For 1 dose of Synthelex, please proceed to the dispensary window to collect your medication." Myra felt the world tilt around. Who made the transfer?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "A human male named Daniel Cole," the clerk said. "He transferred his entire medical allowance to your account approximately 2 minutes ago." Myra did not wait to hear more. She turned and ran toward the exit, pushing past the other patients in her way. Ignoring their startled sounds and angry complaints, she burst through the doors and found herself in the main corridor of Nexus 7. A crowded pathway filled with merchants and travelers from 100 different worlds. She looked left and right, searching desperately for the human who had just saved her life. She spotted him near a food vendor, walking slowly with his hands in his pockets and his head bowed. "Wait," she called out, her voice echoing off the metal walls. "Please wait." Daniel stopped and turned around when he saw her running toward him. Something like resignation crossed his face. "You should be getting your medicine," he said when she reached him. "The dispensary closes in an hour." "Why did you do that?" Myra demanded, her breath coming in short gasps. "I heard you talking to the clerk. You have Varan syndrome. You need that medication to survive. Why would you give it to me?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, his eyes studying her face as if he was trying to find the right words. "Because I could not walk away," he finally said. "Because I have been in your position before, and I know what it feels like to be told that your life is not worth the cost. I will not be the person who does that to someone else. But you will die," Myra said. And now she could feel tears threatening to spill over despite all her training. "Despite all the shame it would bring, you will die because of me." "Maybe," Daniel said, "or maybe I will find another way. I have 3 weeks before things get critical. There are cargo routes that pay well if you are willing to take the risk." "I have done them before." Mira shook her head, her feathers rising in agitation. "I cannot accept this," she said. "I cannot take your life to save my own. Give me a way to pay you back. Tell me what I owe you." Daniel smiled, a small and tired expression that made him look older than his years. "You do not owe me anything," he said. "The transaction is already complete. The credits are in your account, and there is no way to reverse it. So please, just go and get your medicine. Live your life. Take care of your family. That is all the payment I need." Around them, the corridor continued to bustle with activity. A Krethian merchant paused to watch the exchange, his multiple eyes blinking in confusion. A pair of Eldari diplomats slowed their walk, clearly eavesdropping on the conversation. Myra noticed them and felt a flash of anger. These species had watched her suffer in that waiting room without lifting a finger to help, but this human, this stranger from a world she had never seen, had given up everything for her without a second thought. "I do not understand your kind," she said softly. "Everyone says humans are warriors, conquerors who spread across the galaxy like a plague. But you are not like that at all." Daniel laughed, a genuine sound that surprised her. "Humans are complicated," he said. "We can be cruel and selfish. Yes, but we can also be kind. We have this thing called conscience, this voice inside us that tells us when we are doing wrong. Some of us listen to it, and some of us do not. I have spent too many years ignoring mine. I am done with that now." He reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that felt strange but also comforting. "Go," he said. "Get your medicine. And when you go home, tell your family that a human helped you. Tell them that we are not all monsters." Myra looked into his eyes and saw no regret there. No second thoughts. He had made his choice, and he was at peace with it. She wanted to argue more, to find some way to change his mind. But she knew it was pointless. The decision had been made, and there was nothing she could do to undo it. "I will remember you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For the rest of my life, I will remember what you did for me." Daniel nodded and let his hand fall away. "That is enough," he said. "Now go." Myra turned and walked back toward the medical station, her steps slow and heavy at the entrance. She paused and looked back one last time. Daniel was still standing there, watching her, a lone figure in a sea of indifferent strangers. She raised her hand in a gesture of farewell, and he raised his in return. Then she went inside to collect the medicine that would save her life, carrying with her a debt she did not know how to repay. 3 weeks had passed since Daniel gave away his medicine, and his body was beginning to fail. He sat in the cockpit of his ship, a small cargo hauler named the Wanderer. Watching the stars drift slowly past his viewport, his hands trembled as he reached for the navigation console. A symptom that had started 5 days ago and grown steadily worse. The cargo run had not gone as planned. He had taken a dangerous route through disputed territory, hoping to earn enough credits to buy another dose of Scintillax before his time ran out, but the payment had been delayed by bureaucratic disputes, tied up in paperwork that could take weeks to resolve by the time the credits cleared. It would be too late. Daniel leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He was not afraid of dying. Not really. He had lived a decent life, seen things that most people on Earth could only dream of. He had made mistakes, yes. But in the end, he had done one thing that mattered. He had saved a life when it counted. That would have to be enough. A warning light flashed on his console, followed by a sharp beeping sound. Daniel opened his eyes and frowned, pulling up the sensor readings with fingers that barely obeyed his commands. Another ship was approaching, moving fast on an intercept course. For a moment, he felt a surge of fear. Pirates were common in this sector, and his ship was in no condition to outrun them. But then the identification signal came through, and he saw something that made no sense at all. The approaching vessel was Tirana. Daniel stared at the screen, his foggy mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The Tirani did not travel this far from their homeworld. They did not have the ships or the resources for deep space travel, but there it was. A small Tirani craft growing larger in his viewport, its hull painted with the traditional colors of their people. His communication system crackled to life, and a familiar voice filled the cockpit. "Daniel Cole," Myra said, her words carrying the musical accent of her species. "Please respond if you can hear me." Daniel reached for the transmitter, his hand shaking so badly that he nearly missed the button. "I am here," he said, his voice rough and weak. "Myra, what are you doing out here?" "We came to find you," she said, and now he could see her face on the screen, her feathers bright and full again, her eyes shining with health. "We've been searching for 2 weeks. We almost gave up, but my brother refused to stop looking. He said that humans do not give up. So neither would we." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest, an emotion he could not quite name. "You should not be here," he said. "This sector is dangerous. Your ship is not built for this kind of travel." "We know," Myra said, "but we came anyway." Her face moved aside, and the screen filled with other Tirani. More than a dozen of them crowded into the small bridge of their vessel. An elderly male stepped forward, his feathers gray with age but his eyes sharp and clear. "Human Daniel Cole," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I am Elder Kethrol of the Velshin clan. Myra is my granddaughter. She told us what you did for her on Nexus 7. She told us that you gave your life so that she might live." Daniel shook his head weakly. "I gave her my medicine," he said. "That is all." "No," the elder said. "You gave her hope. You gave her proof that the galaxy is not as cold and cruel as we believed. Your act of kindness spread through our community like fire. Through dry grass, people who had never met you wept when they heard what you had done. They asked how they could help." Mira stepped back into view, her expression fierce and determined. "We pooled our resources," she said. "Every family in 3 systems contributed what they could. Artists sold their work. Farmers sold their crops. Elders gave their savings. It took time, but we gathered enough." She held up a small case, and even through the grainy transmission, Daniel could see the familiar packaging of Scintillax inside. "We brought your medicine," she said, "and we brought credits to cover your medical expenses for the next 6 months. You will live. Daniel Cole, we will not let you die." Daniel felt his eyes burning, felt something wet sliding down his cheeks. He had not cried in years, not since his sister's funeral. But now the tears came, whether he wanted them or not. "I cannot accept this," he said, the words automatic, meaningless. It is too much. You already have, Mira said. And he could hear the smile in her voice. The transaction is complete. Those were your words to me, remember? Now they are my words to you. The Tarani vessel drew alongside the Wanderer. Close enough for a direct transfer, Daniel watched through his viewport as a docking tube extended between the two ships. Watched as the airlock cycled open to admit Mira and two others carrying medical supplies. She entered his cockpit and saw the state he was in. The tremors, the pallid skin, the unfocused eyes, without hesitation. She prepared the injection and administered it herself. The Syntellex entered his bloodstream, and Daniel felt the familiar warmth spreading through his body, felt his muscles begin to relax, felt the fog in his mind start to lift. Why? He asked, looking up at her. Why would you do all this for me? Mira knelt beside his chair and took his hand in hers. Because you showed us something, she said. You showed us that one person can make a difference. You showed us that kindness is not weakness. That sacrifice is not foolishness. You changed how we see the universe, Daniel. The least we could do was save your life in return. The elder's voice came through the speaker again. Human Daniel Cole, he said, you have taught my people something we will never forget. We always believed that humans were conquerors, that your species spread through the galaxy, bringing only war and greed. But now we know the truth. Humans can also be kind. Humans can also give. Daniel closed his eyes and let the tears fall. He had given away his future to save a stranger, never expecting anything in return, and now that stranger had given it back to him. Along with something far more valuable, she had given him proof that his choice had mattered, that his sacrifice had meant something. For the first time in 15 years, Daniel Cole felt truly at peace. 1 year had passed since Daniel Cole gave his medicine to a dying Tarani girl on Nexus 7. Now he stood in the observation gallery of the Galactic Commerce Council on Vareth Prime. Watching history unfold beneath him, the council chamber was vast. A circular arena where representatives from over 200 species gathered to debate matters of interstellar importance. Today, they were discussing a proposal that had divided the galaxy for months. They called it the human doctrine. Daniel still found it strange that his name was attached to something so significant. He was just a cargo hauler, a man who had made one impulsive decision in a medical station waiting room, but that decision had grown into something far beyond anything he could have imagined. The Tarani representative rose from her seat, her feathers gleaming under the artificial lights. She was young for a diplomat, barely older than Mira, but her voice carried across the chamber with confidence. Honored representatives, she began, we gathered today to vote on a proposal that would fundamentally change how our galaxy treats those in medical need. The human doctrine would require all medical stations and participating systems to provide emergency treatment regardless of a patient's ability to pay. The costs would be distributed across all member worlds according to their economic capacity. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some representatives nodded in approval, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Krethian delegation made sounds of obvious displeasure, their many legs clicking against the floor in agitation. This proposal is economically unfeasible, the Krethian representative declared, rising to his full height. Medical resources are limited. If we give them away freely, the entire system will collapse. Those who cannot pay should not receive services they cannot afford. That is simply the natural order of things. The Tarani diplomat did not flinch. I understand your concerns, she said, but I would like to share a story with the council. A story that changed the way my people see the galaxy. She gestured toward the observation gallery, and a holographic image appeared above the chamber floor. It showed two figures standing together at a cultural exchange event. A human male and a young Tarani female. Both healthy, both smiling. 1 year ago, the diplomat continued. A young Tarani artist named Mira Velshin traveled to Nexus 7 seeking treatment for crystalline fever. She had sold everything she owned, traveled across 3 systems, and arrived with what she believed was enough credits to buy the medicine that would save her life. But the price had increased due to supply shortages. She was turned away and told to return when she had more money. The chamber fell silent, every eye fixed on the holographic image. She was going to die, the diplomat said, not because there was no medicine, not because her condition was untreatable, but simply because she could not afford the cost. And then something remarkable happened. A human cargo hauler named Daniel Cole, who suffered from his own terminal illness, gave up his monthly dose of Synthilex so that Mira could live. He did not know her. He had never met her before. He simply saw someone in need and chose to help, even though it meant risking his own survival. The Krethian representative made a dismissive sound. One act of foolishness does not justify restructuring the entire galactic economy, he said. The human was clearly mentally unstable. We should not build policy around the actions of madmen. No, the Tarani diplomat said, her voice sharp. Daniel Cole was not mad. He was human, and what he did was not foolishness. It was conscience. She paused, letting the word hang in the air. I admit that we Tarani did not understand this concept at first. She continued. We thought it was a weakness, a flaw in human psychology that made them act against their own interests. But we have come to see it differently. Conscience is the voice that tells you when something is wrong, even when everyone around you says it is acceptable. It is the force that compels you to help others, even when there is no reward, even when it costs you everything. And it is perhaps the most valuable thing that humans have given to the galaxy. She looked directly at the Krethian delegation. You ask why we should adopt human values, she said. I ask you this. What kind of galaxy do we want to live in? Do we want a galaxy where the weak are left to die because they cannot afford mercy? Do we want a galaxy where a child's life is worth less than the credits in her pocket? Or do we want something better? The chamber erupted in discussion, voices rising and falling in a dozen different languages. Daniel watched from the gallery, his heart pounding in his chest. He had not asked for any of this. He had not wanted to become a symbol or a figurehead, but here he was, watching his one small act of kindness ripple outward into something that might change the lives of billions. Myra stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Are you nervous? She asked, terrified. He admitted, what if it does not pass? What if all of this was for nothing? Myra smiled and shook her head. It was never for nothing, she said. Even if the vote fails today, the story will continue to spread. People will hear about what you did, and some of them will be changed by it. That is how the universe gets better, one small act at a time. Below them, the chamber began to settle as the council prepared to vote. Representatives activated their voting consoles, their decisions registered by the central computer. Daniel held his breath, his eyes fixed on the tally board as the numbers began to appear. For a long moment, the outcome hung in balance, the count shifting back and forth between approval and rejection. And then, slowly, the approval column pulled ahead. The final vote was close. Barely a majority, but it was enough. The human doctrine had passed. The chamber erupted in a mixture of cheers and protests. But Daniel barely heard any of it, stood frozen in the gallery, watching the tally board with tears streaming down his face. Mira squeezed his arm, her own eyes bright with emotion. You did this, she said. You changed everything. Daniel shook his head. We did this, he said. All of us together. Later, as they walked through the streets of Vareth Prime, Mira told him something that made him laugh. My people have a new word now, she said. We borrowed it from human language and adapted it into Tarani speech. The word is conscience. Daniel looked at her with surprise. Really? Yes, she said. It has become one of the most important words in our vocabulary. We teach it to our children now. We tell them about the human who gave his life for a stranger. And we explain that this is what conscience means. Daniel was quiet for a moment, thinking about all the years he had spent ignoring that voice inside. Himself, humans have been trying to figure out that word for thousands of years. He finally said, "I am glad it travels well." They walked on through the alien city. Two friends from different worlds, carrying between them a simple truth that had shaken the galaxy. Kindness was not weakness, sacrifice was not foolishness, and one person, acting on conscience, could change everything.